Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and today is going to be a rather special. I don't know about monumentous, but rather special edition of Atlas Information because I will be taking the gloves off, as it were. I will be lifting the veil and sharing with all of you some very personal experiences and insights, which I hope will serve you very well in your own journey, on your own path. Because so much of what we talk about, we, out of necessity, sort of describe in the abstract. We try to bring examples or case studies or allegories and analogies. We use media when available, right? Archetypal characters and stories, parables, in other words, modern day parables, if you will. And I'll be doing some of that today as well. But because we're ultimately talking about gnosis here, wisdom, experiential knowledge, there is really no substitute for experience. There is really no better way to truly grasp, to truly comprehend the nature and essence of the topics we cover here than by witnessing their application and having access, sort of ringside seats, if you will. There is a reason, and I've, so often I sound like a broken record or like a parrot just, rhyming off catchphrases. But there is a reason why I named my YouTube channel Atlas Information, and why my original blog and original Facebook page was likewise called Atlas Information. I still have the URL atlas.info because unlike so many of the so-called gurus or guides or teachers that are available to us now in the present day, very often they're talking about stuff that happened to them long ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, who knows? And in the case of those teachers whom we know only through their writings, not only are they often relaying events which happened decades earlier, but of course they've since disincarnated, they've passed on. They're not here to share with you in real time the process that they themselves had to go through. I, however, am here to share that process with you. You get an inside look, a ringside seat to someone who is actively sparring with his own demons. A demon which is, by all accounts, no pushover. Some of you have witnessed that demon possess me live on this broadcast, on this program, as I experienced a grand mal seizure and went away. And for a number of minutes, you saw me doing behaviors which, by all accounts, were entirely the volition of that entity that is responsible not only for most, if not all, of my suffering, but also that condition that I have been diagnosed with, known as epilepsy, and also the manic depression that I suffer from, and so many other habits and behaviors and conditioned desires, fetishes even. And so last week, if you recall, I was in a rather precarious state because I was still in the depths of a depression that I had been in for nearly 10 days by then. And that state carried on throughout this past week. So for more than 2 weeks, I was right down in the mire, in the ninth circle of hell, in the deepest, darkest bout of depression. And I used that opportunity last week to make it a teaching opportunity, a learning opportunity, and give you all a window into how and why we are tested, why we must descend into hell. What is the point? What is the purpose? And it seemed only fitting that not only should I talk about that, the purpose for our tests and our trials and ordeals on the AUM of Life. And you notice the background today is my AUM background, right? The spiral. Wouldn't it be fitting to be able to follow up last week with a program devoted to succeeding in those trials, passing the tests, learning what we need to learn by descending into hell, comprehending the sources and causes of our suffering and our conditioned thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, habits, which continue to perpetuate our suffering and indeed, in many cases, inflict suffering upon others. Now, I didn't embark last week with this intention in mind. However, on Sunday night after my live stream, I had a lengthy conversation with a very, very dear friend and someone with whom I have a very deep soul connection. And she was there for me uh, in a way that I've so often found myself there for others. But we all need help sometimes. We all need someone, right? Like doctors and healers generally are no good at healing themselves all the time, right? A therapist can't perform their therapy on themselves, right? Or give themselves counseling, right? That's not how that works. We all need somebody sometimes to listen to us, right? Really listen to us, hear us out, empathize with us, and mirror back to us what it is we need to see in ourselves, and also to give us whatever guidance and help. And in the case of myself and this particular individual, she essentially gave me permission. She said, do what you need to do. If you're in hell, do what you need to do to cope. And as I probably have talked about in the past, I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, I don't drink. But my drug of choice, if you will, is food. I eat. Emotional eating. And not just emotional eating, but binging on snack foods and sugar and ice cream. Well, not sugar per se, right? I don't obviously very few people will like open up a bag of sugar and eat it with a tablespoon. Right? Sugar is not truly addictive in that sense. That's a myth. Because if sugar was addictive, people would literally be snorting it out of the bag. And because sugar is 99 cents a bag still, like it's 99 cents for a pound of sugar, it's one of the cheapest things you can still buy. I mean, all those obese people would literally, they wouldn't be going and paying $6 for a caramel macchiato at Starbucks or a frappuccino or whatever, right? Paying nearly $10 for that, or like $8 for a bubble tea. I'm more or less quoting Canadian prices. It's probably a little cheaper in the States. But you know what I mean? People with a sweet tooth wouldn't go and spend exorbitant amounts of money if all they were doing was feeding a sugar addiction. Right? So there's more to it than just the sugar. I have absolutely no desire to eat sugar out of a bag. So it's not addictive in the same way that, let's say, alcohol is addictive, because alcoholics, without the option of something else, they will drink like forms of alcohol which are completely unpalatable, like certain like pine spirits and like other like cleaning alcohol and Listerine, and it's like they will literally drink if they can. Really, people who are severe alcoholics, if they're denied access to alcohol to get their fix, they will get their alcohol however they can get it. But you see, people with a sweet tooth don't behave that way. Sure, they'll turn to maybe chocolate or licorice and candy, and there's a million different sources of sugar out there. But the cheapest, most available source of sugar, no one with a sweet tooth wants to eat it that way. Although I have heard cases of individuals who claim that they had family members or so on who would eat sugar out of the sugar jar, out of the bag with a spoon. I don't know. I don't see it. And I do have a sweet tooth, right? I'm a self-professed, confessed, like, food is my drug. Salt, fat, carbs, dairy, right? Sugar, chocolate, all of these things. Potato chips, cheesy, and those horrible, terrible industrial coatings, toppings, right? Like potato chips, like Doritos, like the powdery cheese stuff they put on Doritos, and sour cream and onion powder. I mean, that's for me. That's always been ever since I was a kid. That's been my favorite potato chip flavor. And those onion rings, they're like cheesies, but they're puffed into rings, and then they're dunked in sour cream and onion powder, and they're sour cream and onion rings. That's what they like. Those things, like, these are my drugs, right? These are how I cope, especially when I'm depressed. But it's not like I sit there and like munch them and that's enough. No, I have to binge on them. Like, I eat them until I'm like stuffed, or I'm full, or at least until the bag is empty, right? So it's not something I'm proud of. And whenever I would um, fall into a depression, I would try to mitigate. I try to force myself and use as much willpower as I could to stop myself and limit the damage, right? Limit how much weight I would gain, and that type of thing. Well, last Sunday after the live stream, I spoke to this friend of mine, and she said, just let yourself go. Just let yourself, just give yourself what you need to cope. And she basically gave me permission. She said, don't worry about it. This too shall pass. But in the meantime, just do what you need to do to get by. And as a direct result of that, on Thursday, was it Thursday? No, it wouldn't have been Thursday. It would have been, yeah, actually, there was a sale on a certain kind of frozen pizza, a supreme pizza from Dr. Oetker, and it was a pepperoni and sausage pizza, like a meat lover's pizza, and it also had like red peppers and like spicy honey mustard in the sauce. Like, it was crazy, but it was on special. It was really cheap. So I went to the grocery store. I ended up buying 3 of them. I ate one Wednesday night, and on Thursday I ate two frozen pizzas. And because of the nature of the decadent uh, uh, food of those 2 pizzas, um, the fact that they were covered in Italian sausage or spicy sausage, that's pork. And of course, the pepperoni was pork too. Now, pork stimulates lust. And as a result of me having 2 such pizzas that day, that night, at nighttime, I was um, very susceptible to lustful dreams. And suffice it to say, when someone is practicing scientific chastity and not engaging in orgasm, it's very common to have wet dreams. Now, oftentimes those wet dreams occur because we are preserving our sexual force. We're not wasting it. So the prana, the chi, accumulates within us, and we become very attractive hosts to entities known as astrolarvae, otherwise known as incubi and succubi. And these are entities which, these are, essentially malevolent entities on the astral plane. The Sufis refer to them as jinn, and they will come and they will fornicate with us in our sleep. And in that act of fornication, we will fantasize and visualize them a certain way. They will hypnotize us as we are sleeping, and on the astral plane, on the lunar astral plane, we will have a wet dream, an erotic dream. And oftentimes they will play out some fantasy that they know will stimulate us. And usually it doesn't take very much stimulation at all, because these are, in the case of men, these are succubi. And one can imagine, without using too much of a stretch, too much of an imagination, where the word succubi or succubus comes from. That first part of that word has a connotation that relates to oral sex. So hopefully I don't have to spell it out. By the way, if it hasn't become obvious yet, we are going to be touching on many, adult themes in today's presentation. So just be aware of that. It's unavoidable given the context of today's topic. So, okay. So a succubus, literally and quite literally, okay, right? It sucks our energy, our vitality, right? Our vital energy. Like a mosquito or any other parasite that sucks our blood, like the vampire, the mythical vampire that sucks blood. The succubus is actually the metaphysical entity upon which the allegory of the vampire is based. And while there are real vampires that actually do suck blood, they are physical beings, like sort of they feed on the vitality, the prana that is in the blood. And there is an entire school of black magic, which is people call it red magic or blood magic, but it's black magic where they're sucking blood. But the succubus can suck our vital energy directly in the etheric plane and in the lunar astral plane. However, because they do this through fantasy and the physical body responds accordingly. So the result is an orgasm or a wet dream. But what happens metaphysically as a succubus sucks vital energy, practically speaking, we're talking about right? We're talking about fellatio, right? We're talking that's what happens in the fantasy. And I don't need to tell you that oral sex, fellatio, is obviously a very common practice, and it's one of the most common fetishes that men have. And why that is, we'll be getting into. We'll be coming back to this momentarily. But for whatever reason, I awoke from that dream. And I awoke from the dream very stimulated and sexually aroused. I managed to awake before the succubi got what they wanted, because there was more than one. And when it comes to fellatio and sex in general, one of the most common and popular fantasies among men is the threesome, for the man to be pleasured by two women and to be fellated by two women. And so succubi, when they work in teams, will come and they will perform that fantasy, and they can get what they want very quickly that way. Because there are few fantasies that men have that are more arousing and stimulating to their imagination, to their lust, than the threesome. However, I did not fall. Right? Before they were able to get what they want, I snapped out of it and I woke up. I realized what was going on, and I became lucid enough to know that this is not what I really want. But clearly something in me wanted that. Right? Otherwise, and I can tell you, in all honesty and in complete, without any shame, without any, not being proud of the fact, right? I can tell you that when I say most men have a certain fantasy around oral sex and being pleasured by two or more women and receiving fellatio by two or more women at once, when I say most men have this fantasy, I include myself in that. I suffer from that desire, from that lust. There is something inside of me that has always, ever since I was first hit puberty. And well, again, there's more to this. But this was part one, as I sat and meditated and performed pranayama and using the mantra E-A-O, which is a mantra which can be used during White Tantra, which we covered 2 weeks ago, the different techniques and by which we can transmute the sexual force. I had been very aroused in the dream, and I awoke in a very aroused state, a very aroused condition. And rest assured that the lust that I had been experiencing in that dream, the compulsion to give these succubi what they wanted, was there, to allow them to finish what they started. It was there, and I awoke, and that desire was still there. That temptation was still there. The temptation to masturbate and continue the fantasy was still very much there. It didn't go away just because a part of me realized what was happening and hey, wait a minute, this is not kosher. We don't want this to happen. We don't want these succubi to steal our energy, right? We don't want to give in to lust. And yet, once I awoke and I found myself in that condition, the desire to give in to lust was still there. The succubi were gone. Well, at least I could no longer see them. I could no longer sense whatever they were trying to do. But this is no time to blame others or whatever. No. The desire for me to finish what they started, that desire came from me, from within me. Because I have had that desire since I was 14 years old. And I have acted out on that desire with women many times in my life. Not that I'm proud of it, it's just a fact. That was my first clue. And remember, I was also suffering from depression, right? So I was coping with the depression by binging on pizza, which of course, I don't have to tell you what is so magnificent about pizza as a drug. The carbs and the fat and everything else. And directly related to that was this sexual adventure and near misadventure. Was brought very close to the brink of falling, but I was able to transmute that lust into something positive. And that was part one of my comprehension as I meditated and practiced pranayama and practiced the transmutation. I had an ex-girlfriend once in Spain who referred to it as solo tantra. I've talked in the past about the Vairoli mudra, which is one of the practices of the rites of rejuvenation. There is a way to induce arousal in oneself without masturbation that one can then transmute the aroused sexual energy. I'm not going to go deeper into that topic right now because we're going to run out of time today if I do. But in many times when a man wakes up in the morning, he wakes up aroused. And so often a man can perform that exercise of the Vairoli mudra to transmute that sexual energy and relax his aroused state. And sometimes this serves a very practical purpose. Sometimes if a man wakes up and really needs to go to the washroom, he really needs to urinate, like desperately, but cannot because he's aroused, that has caused many a man a lot of like a lot of discomfort. So the ability to know how to transmute the sexual force has a very practical application in that case. When a man awakes from sleep aroused and very quickly, within seconds, can transmute the force, and he will relax, he will go soft. And then of course if he needs to urinate, then it's no problem, right? Because it's back to normal. That all that being an aside. The next day, in the course of events, I found myself doing some grocery shopping, and there was a particular brand of sour cream and onion potato chips, which were on sale. I bought 2 bags, 200-gram bags. I'm talking the big bags. I ate one in the afternoon, and then in the evening, I put on a terrible movie, Sicario, Day of the Soldad. It's a Denis Villeneuve movie. It's a really pointless, empty, meaningless film. But I was watching that in the evening and decided, you know what? I'm going to take the advice that I was given. I had 2 pizzas yesterday. I'm going to have 2 bags of chips today. And I ate the second bag of chips during the movie, like instead of popcorn. Now, once again, because I had eaten late at night and a whole bag of chips late at night, and all the MSG in those chips, they stimulated the mind and whatever, and I started having very vivid dreams. Again, only this time, it wasn't an erotic dream. It wasn't a sexual dream. No, this time I dreamt about my father. My father, who you may know, passed away exactly 2 months ago, back in August 8th. And this would have been, so today we are the 12th. So Sunday, Saturday. So like 8th or 9th. So 2 months to the day that my father passed away, I had these 2 bags of chips, and then I dreamt about my father. But the dream I had about my father was, again, nothing to be proud of. For in that dream, my father did what he always did when he was still alive, which was tell me how to do stuff, tell me what to do. I was in the middle of doing something, he would come over and he would start correcting me and tell me how to do it. And he was always telling me what to do with my life, and like fathers have a tendency to do in general. But my father in particular, he was very much of a managerial mindset. And he was very much a control freak. He liked telling people what to do. And he really wasn't satisfied unless they did what he said, and unless they did it the way he told them to do it. Now, suffice it to say, throughout my lifetime, this created a lot of tension and was a source of frustration, because I, for one, like most people, don't like to be told what to do. And I always reacted poorly to being told what to do, especially when I was being condescended or patronized, especially when I knew what I was doing, but I was being treated like a child by my father, who just assumed I didn't know what I was doing, or even if I thought I knew what I was doing, he knew better. And he would tell me how to do it. So for the 6 years following my mom's passing, that I was looking after my dad, and his health was debilitating and going down, and his strength was waning. He was becoming weaker, more frail, and more afraid. His strength, his willpower was failing him, so he was becoming more frail and afraid and fragile. On many occasions, I had the opportunity and the quote, the justification, the reason, not just an opportunity from a circumstantial point of view, but he gave me a reason to finally let him have it. And for me to be able to tell him, look, I'm 52 years old. Stop treating me like a child. Stop telling me what to do. Stop trying to live my life. Stop trying to control me. But I never let myself go there. I never let myself do it, because my compassion for my father overruled any desire that I felt for satisfaction. And so I denied myself the satisfaction of telling the old man what's what, and finally letting him have it, and finally giving him a piece of my mind, and finally just unloading him after 50 years of being pushed around and patronized, and saying, look, I'm a middle-aged man. I'm 52 years old. You don't get to treat me like a child anymore. But again, I never let myself do it, because my father was frail. His heart was broken. His wife had just passed away. It had only been 6 years since my mother died. And his health was failing, his willpower was failing, and ever more and more I could see that the fear that my father never faced and never conquered in his life was now getting the upper hand, because my father was afraid of everything. He didn't have the willpower to overpower his fear anymore. So now his fear was getting the upper hand, and my father was terrified of everything. So the last thing that I wanted to do was to take advantage of a frail old man, because that would just have been a cowardly act on my part. So I didn't let myself do that. But on Friday night, in the height or the depths of my depression, depending on however you want to interpret that, after eating 2 bags of sour cream and onion chips, that's 400 grams. That's a pound of potato chips. And watching a terrible, horrible movie with no catharsis, getting no satisfaction out of watching this movie, a complete and total waste of 2.5 hours of my life. That night in my dreams, I let my father have it. I was doing something. You know what I was doing? I was drawing one of my diagrams, like, as you know, that I often do right here on the live stream. And I was drawing a line, and then I was labeling the line. And he said, no, 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 don't do it that way. Do it this way and that way. Don't draw it like this, draw it like that. And myself, who have been doing what I call strategic communications, or visual aids, what some people call infographics, or other people could call diagramming. You can call it whatever the hell you want. But what my book is filled with, and what I've been doing since I was 13 years old, when I bought my first computer with a copy of Microsoft Visio on it, And I was even doing this stuff for my dad while he was a manager at the factory where he worked. I would do memos for him and stuff, and I would use Visio and use all this diagramming and stuff to do these visual memos. So all the women in the shirt factory who didn't speak English could understand what my dad was trying to communicate better, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so I let my dad have it in the dream. He was trying to tell me how to do something that I had been doing for more than 35 years of my life, and that I had mastered in those 35 years, and that I had even done for him way back when I was in high school. And I just laid into him. I finally got a chance to tell the old man what's what, and he had to sit there and take it. He couldn't escape. He couldn't get away. I finally got that satisfaction that which that part of me wanted so desperately, but that I wouldn't let myself do for real. But here we were in the lunar astral plane in a dream. That's the subconscious mind. That's psychological hell. And now I was just fire and brimstone, and all of that pent up frustration and 50 years of being condescended and patronized and controlled and being made to feel afraid of my father and afraid of his approval, or desiring his approval, and being controlled and manipulated by him, and being shamed and guilted because I wasn't doing what he wanted me to do the way he wanted me to do it. And all of these emotions were all just finally just indulging all of that. But then I realized what I was doing. And I knew, and I realized, wait, there's a reason why I never let myself go here. I never let myself do this. And I snapped out of it, and I woke up. And immediately, I was in meditation, and I began to meditate, to do retrospection meditation on the dream that I just had. This was about 4 in the morning, 3:34 in the morning, something like that. I didn't really check the clock. It was because when you wake up from a dream, you don't want to move. If you move, you disturb your astral body. You fall out of alignment. Your mental body and your astral body falls out of alignment, and you have a very slim chance of remembering your dream. But if you're dreaming and you wake up, don't move, don't shift, don't even adjust, nothing. Just in whatever weird position you are in, because like if you're like me, I toss and turn during the night. So sometimes I wake up and I'm like those funny cats on YouTube, right? That end up sleeping, and they have like an arm and a leg here and an arm there, and they're upside down, and their heads between their legs, and all kind of like weird contorted yogi positions, right? Because they also toss and turn while they sleep, right? Like me. So sometimes I wake up in the strangest, most bizarre positions, right? So there I was in this weird position, but I didn't move. I just closed. I closed my eyes, and I relaxed, and I focused. I concentrated. I made sure that even in that position, I could still be relaxed, and without moving, without disturbing my astral body, I focused and concentrated on the memory of what I had just experienced in that dream. Giving my father a dressing down, right? Giving the old man what's what. unleashing all of my fire and fury and frustration after 50 years of being pushed around by the old man. Now I finally had, he was going to get his comeuppance, and I was going to get my satisfaction. That is what I meditated on. And I just played the scenario over and over and over like a videotape in meditation. No judgment, no commentary, just observing what was I thinking, what was I feeling, what was happening energetically in me, what was I reacting to, what triggered this whole thing. And the anger, right? The vitriol. And then in the meditation, expand it out and saying, okay, but I've been depressed for some 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks now. And I know that depression is subconscious rage. In the meditation on that dream, in my subconscious mind, in the lunar astral plane, there I was playing out that desire, the desire for satisfaction, to tell the old man what's what, to say, I don't want to be controlled. Stop controlling me. I experienced and knew, I experienced the rage, the anger, the frustration, the pent up resentment because of someone who was controlling me. And as I continued to meditate on this, it became in a flash of insight, of comprehension, that encapsulated not just the last 2 weeks, but the last 2 months. Well, not just the last 2 minutes of my dream and the rage, but the previous last 2 nights and my previous dream, the erotic dream, and then the 2 weeks of depression, and then the 2 months since my father died. And then the 2 times 25 years that I've been alive, that I've been going through this, the previous 20 years. And it all stitched together, and it all just formed a singular, comprehensive, conscious comprehension. The big picture in complete and total clarity. And the complexity of that picture, the intricacies of all of the dynamics, all of the facets at play, and the entity that I live with, my demon, the one that's responsible for my epileptic seizures, in other words, the one that possesses me, and the one responsible for my depression, which I have often revealed to you all and talked about often as fear, that his fundamental, essential nature is fear, and how fear is control. The flip side of fear, control and fear are two sides of the same coin. It's the same demon. It's the same ego. Because fear of outcomes directly feeds the desire to control outcomes. Period. End of story. No discussion. This is an absolute truth. If you have a desire to control an outcome, and the more obsessed you are with that outcome, the more terrified you are of failing to achieve that outcome. That's what drives that desire, that obsession, that singular intent for a certain thing to happen, is because you're terrified of it not happening, or you're terrified of living without that outcome. So when people strive to achieve their goal, right, and they strive for success, and they work themselves to the bone for fame and fortune and whatever the case may be that they desire, their heart's desire, it's not just because of greed or identification and attachment to that thing. It's because of their fear of inadequacy, their fear of being judged as inadequate, their fear of not having the comfort and security of having attained whatever outcome which it gives the promise of comfort and security. Because the desire for comfort and security is fear. And I've given entire lectures on fear, the nature of fear. I'm writing a book on the nature of fear, which will be this humanity's de facto work on the truth, essence, and nature of fear. Because most people think that fear is the fight or flight instinct. I've already identified more than 40 words beginning with the letter F related to fear, that fear is directly responsible for. But wait, we're only getting started. Benjamin says, patience and compassion are your virtue. Thank you for that, Benjamin. And Kathy says, thank you for being so candid and sharing your experience. Kathy, we're only getting warmed up. The comprehension that was granted unto me, the download that I received in meditation, the insight that I'm about to share with you, we're only getting, we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg yet. So fear wants to control, and fear hates being controlled. So the fact that I was born into a family where the patriarch, my father, was a control freak, what that meant was he had the same demon that I did. Now, my father didn't suffer from epileptic seizures, but what my father did suffer from was panic attacks. Now, he only began suffering from panic attacks after he went through, he was in a couple car accidents. In one car accident, he was rear-ended, and another one, he was, I guess, he was T-boned in his Cadillac. And it was not long after that, but he also sustained some head injuries, and shortly after that, he began experiencing panic attacks. If he heard a sudden noise or whatever, that would trigger, the head injury that he received was like a blunt force trauma, but it was a soft tissue injury, so it was like whiplash, right? But he had the like a head injury that football players and hockey players endure when they get hit in the head too many times. Sure, they're wearing a helmet, but the brain inside of the skull is still sloshing around and getting compressed and stuff, and can still experience like internal blunt force trauma. And he went and had MRIs done and everything else, and it seemed that whatever injury that he endured, it allowed his fear to now express itself that much more acutely than it was able to before. And so he began experiencing panic attacks. So I can tell you that his fear, and he also started experiencing depression as well. And I can tell you that the nature of his depression, the nature of his panic attacks, and the nature of how he triggered me, meaning my demon, through his controlling. Like when we butt heads on my life choices, like when I was 16 and told him I was going to go into dramatic arts instead of STEM at university, and it was like it was the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. We were just banging heads. Like he would not give and I would not give. We were like completely attuned energetically. So his demon was every bit as powerful and strong as mine, only it exerted its control and influence over him in different ways. And remember, he was the patriarch of a family. He had a traditional Hungarian wife who he also had many arguments with. They fought like cats and dogs, but in the end, my mother still often, took the submissive or subservient position and did what my father told her to do. She might have complained and fought tooth and nail, right, to avoid it, but in the end, she would end up doing it begrudgingly, right? But my father was also a manager in a factory, and so he had many outlets for his control, right? I had none of that, right? My demon had no control outlets apart from video games. There was nothing that I was able to really control. So I had a lot of pent up desire to control. My father got to, vent a lot of that, get a lot of it out of his system and indulge a lot of it, of sure, but also get a lot of it out of his system. But in his old age, when after my mother died, that was one of the huge things that he was unable to control. He was unable to keep her alive. He was unable for the chemotherapy and the other cancer therapies to save her. And that really triggered in him this feeling of helplessness that overpowered him, and it allowed the demon to overwhelm him with fear and terror of everything now, because he also became very, very self-conscious of his own mortality, which was inevitable really when your wife of 50 some years dies. Invariably you're going to start thinking about your own mortality, and so he was terrified of everything. So I saw this, I knew this, and I felt it, right? I empathized with him because I knew his suffering, because I know what it meant to live with a demon of fear, and I knew his demon intimately because we had gone head to head sparring for decades, for my entire life. Now, did I lose my train of thought? I kind of went off on a tangent, didn't I? But like I say, this is inevitable. This is going to happen because everything that I'm sharing with you was all part of that singular flash of comprehension. And this is why it's very often that you see books written by Gnostics and messengers and masters and so on, or like Blavatsky and so on, like, and why the Bible and sacred texts are hundreds, if not thousands, of pages long, because it's just words just don't do it justice. They do not do insight and revelation justice. That's why Sufis. That's why the Sufi poet Rumi spent a lifetime writing about love, and he still couldn't capture the essence and truth of it in its totality and its comprehensiveness, right? So that's what this insight in meditation was like, this comprehension. So I had denied the demon its satisfaction. But before my father died, I had convinced myself, I had told myself and given myself solace that once he is gone and my responsibility to my family is fulfilled, I took care of my mom during her cancer. I took care of my father during his illness and old age. And now he had passed, and I spent a month, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, organizing all of his final arrangements. Yes, with the help of his life partner and of course my brother on the financial side and everything else, but the organization, and then I spent a full week writing his obituary, not his obituary. Anyway, the speech that you say at the funeral mass. I spent an entire week writing that, my tribute to him. When it was all said and done and finally over, I had prepared myself for finally being free, finally being out from under the thumb of my father. I mean, after all, he had now passed away. But he wrote a will. And the nature of the inheritance and how it was to be split 50-50 between my brother and I includes a house that's filled with stuff. It was all my dad's stuff, my mom and dad's stuff. And the way everything shook out is my brother, as the executor of the estate, is handling all the accounts and all the financials and everything else. He's the executor of the estate, and he executes the will according to my father's wishes. I, as one of the beneficiaries, I have to abide by my father's wishes in the will. And that's fine. That in and of itself is not a problem. Like, I don't want anybody to think that my father was explicitly and deliberately trying to screw me out of anything, or my brother for that matter. That's because that's not the case. However, practically speaking, my brother lives in the United States. I am here in the house, which means the house, the management of the ongoing upkeep of the house, but more importantly, the liquidation of of like 80 years worth of accumulated stuff now falls onto my shoulders. And every time since my father's passing, and I finished the website for Attlas Conscious Arts, I was able to get through that, but as soon as I finished that, I fell into the depression, because I had nothing left to do, nothing left to work on. And the next item on my agenda was to start liquidating stuff, start throwing stuff out, start trying, like, putting stuff online to sell antiques and whatnot. And all of that time and all of that effort and all of that energy was just this huge task, this huge monumental monster work, which I really don't want to do. I have better things to spend my time on. I have better uses of my energy. And I, who am not a materialist, I, who have spent my adult life not falling into that trap, right? Not like having as little stuff as possible, because the things you own end up owning you. So none of the stuff in this house is mine. But now all of a sudden it was mine, and it was my responsibility. And my brother and I, we need to sell the house as soon as possible, as soon as it comes out of probate, which means all the junk needs to be cleared out of the house. And I'm here alone. I don't drive. I'm not allowed to drive. I mean, I have a license, but I'm not permitted to drive the car that was left, right? My brother doesn't want me driving the car, and the insurance company doesn't want me driving the car, so I can't drive. I don't have a vehicle, but I have to get rid of all the stuff. So this was to the demon, to my fear, to that element in me that wants to be in control of my life, and who is actually quite lazy when it comes to this kind of stuff. He doesn't want to do what other people tell him to do. He wants to do what he wants to do. He wants to be in control. This being dumped on, having all this stuff, and these are antiques, and nobody wants these antiques anymore. They're out of style. They're out of fashion. Nobody wants them. And it's like, and all the books and all the tchotchkes and it just goes on and on and on and on, all this stuff. And then there's all the junk that my dad saved because of his fear. My dad was a hoarder. So was my mom. So we're talking about, like, now they weren't hoarders like what you see on the Learning Channel or the Discovery Channel when you watch that show Hoarders. So no, there are not mountains of stuff in the basement in every corner, like mountains of stuff. Thank God. It's not that bad, but it's bad enough for one person to have to try to deal with when they don't drive, and they have to somehow find a way to, and then on top of everything, deal with the fact that one of the things that my father imposed on me and my mother imposed on me throughout my life was to value these treasures, these so expensive, treasures, and hand carved this and antique that, and so on. So I'm looking at these things and I know how valuable they were to my parents. So I can't just toss these things in the trash, because they are valuable. And it's like I can't bring myself to throw away beautiful hand carved, handcrafted, hand painted stuff, especially when today everything is throwaway. And these things are, like, honestly, like, so much more valuable, and people don't care about stuff anymore. Like, it's this weird inversion that has happened when it comes to, yes, I know I shouldn't have any identification and attachment to these things, but I can't help it. I was conditioned that way, that you don't throw valuable things away that still have value, right? Because I was, we were immigrants, and I was raised that way, to value valuable things. But now I was dealing with the fact that I got to get rid of valuable things, and nobody wants them because everything's gone out of fashion. People want throwaway stuff now. And you can tell, as I'm expressing this, the confusion, the frustration, the exacerbation in my voice, right? How much of an imposition this is, especially on that part of me that does not want to have to deal with this, and thought he was finished and he was done and he was out from under my father's thumb. But all of this circumstantial stuff, all of this getting dumped in my lap, right, was like the last screw that my father left me. Like he's gone. He's not even here anymore. He shuffled off this mortal coil, but he still managed a way to impose his will onto me. I mean, they even call it a will and testament, right? And impose, more stuff for me to do the way he would have wanted me to do it. And he has my brother as executor of the estate to execute the will according to his wishes. And my brother, being a materialist, shares a lot of those same values that my father had. And so because he is in control of the trust fund that is my share of the inheritance, I cannot afford to make enemies with my brother. I cannot afford to do something which so openly and blatantly goes against what my brother thinks I should do. Because my brother is executor of the estate. He is an extension of my father's will, literally, right? And literally, legally, financially, practically speaking, my father is still exerting his will over me. And the demon was freaking out. He was livid. He was having a temper tantrum in my subconscious mind, and that rage was what was sucking the life out of me, which is the number one symptom of depression. No energy, no motivation. And I could not bring myself to clean anything, to move anything, to organize anything. I would look at shelves, I would look at boxes, I would look at things, and I would just collapse in defeat. Because anything that I looked at when it came to fulfilling this final duty to my father of executing his will and getting rid of all of his junk, right? Being stuck under that, the things you own end up owning you. The things he owned were now owning me. And the demon was not having it. He was like a terrible two throwing a temper tantrum in Walmart. Only it was all happening in my subconscious mind. I didn't have access to it until Friday night and that dream, when the demon finally had his opportunity to go face to face with the old man and tell the old man what's what. And I was able to witness that and wake up from that and immediately begin meditating on that and meditating on the significance of that. Where was this coming from? Why was I harboring all of this pent up frustration and everything else? And then so everything that I've been describing to you just bloomed in comprehension. This is why every time I looked at the shelves and I felt totally overwhelmed and drained, and it was like it all suddenly was clear as day. It's clear as day. But then we get to Thursday night. We get to the adult themes that I alluded to related to the succubus and fellatio. Because what was the connection between the drug that I took to cope with depression? What was the connection between and control, fellatio. Now, hear me clearly. Fellatio is a form of sexual degeneration. Fellatio is not about love. Fellatio is not about white tantra. Fellatio is an inversion of the flow of the sexual force. And fellatio is 100% about control. It is about dominance and submission. And control invariably, automatically, you cannot talk about control without submission. Without controlling of what? Controlling of who? Controlling of outcomes. And I've said many times, language has power and intrinsic meaning. Outcome. That right there, that is a physical, practical description of orgasm. Certainly for men, but also for women. It's just that much more obvious when it comes to men, right? We even use that word, okay? The to come. Okay, so outcomes are related 100% to lust and sexuality, but to lust. And as I've explained before, if lust is the whore of Babylon, fear is her pimp. Lust works for fear. Lust is the engine, the seduction, the mechanism by which fear gets to control outcomes. Fear and traditional ancient mythology, lust is Lilith. Lilith's partner is Asmodeus. Fear. Fear and lust. Because control of what? Control of others, control of outcomes. The desire for a certain outcome is why you need the control. So these two things are intimate. If lust is the mother of all desire, fear is their father. Lust and fear united. This is why domination and submission is such a common aspect and theme in sexuality. You even have an entire school of fetish around what's called BDSM, right? Bondage, domination, submission, and masochism, I believe, is the M, if I'm not mistaken. BDSM. It's all about, right? Well, fetish is related to domination and submission, and bondage and, right, sadomasochism. Well, actually, maybe that's what the S is. BDSM. Domination, submission, and like masochism, sadomasochism. So we don't need to get into details around that. You can use your imagination. You know what I'm talking about. You also know that in your experience, whether you're a male or a female, you know that very often, certainly when you look at movies and media, and absolutely if you've ever experienced or looked at pornography, you know that domination and submission and control fantasies. There was even a Depeche Mode song with the lyric, "Let's play master and servant." Right? There are men have fantasies about, dressing up their wives in their high school uniforms. right? In their white blouses and kilts from high school, and put their hair in pigtails to make themselves look like 14-year-old girls. This is very, very, very common in Japan, where Japanese businessmen go to brothels where the prostitutes look like they're 13, 14-year-old girls, which is not difficult in Asian countries because Asian women tend to age differently. And you can have 30, 40-year-old Asian women who look and act and sound, vocalize like they did when they were 14, 15 years old. And so there's lots of fetishes around this domination. But that desire to dominate is born out of innate insecurity. That innate insecurity is born out of fear. Fear wants to control. And the more control you have, the more potent, or the less fear fears, if that makes any sense. But the more it controls, the less it executes that other side of the coin. And so the weaker or the more submissive, that's the more controlling you are able to enact. And this ties back to fear as an ego, as an I, and self-aggrandizement, puffing oneself up. This is how all of this relates back to pride and vanity and narcissism and ego in the amalgamated sense, the puffing up of the false self, right? The sticking out of the chest and the pounding of the chest and standing tall and standing proud, and because of all of the everyone who's submissive kneeling at your feet. And that includes, for men, that includes women. And the kneeling at your feet is directly related to fellatio, is directly related to oral sex. Nothing will make a man feel more like a god, feel more like a lord, than a woman on her knees, right, worshiping him like an idol. And what do religions expect of their followers? To swallow the word of God without question. To take whatever it is that God feeds you without question. And even if you watch a movie like Shawshank Redemption, in which the sisters attempt to get Andy Dufresne, the sisters, that's just what they call them, but they're all just men. They're men. And they had been the sisters, the so-called sisters, the Shawshank prison's rapists had already been raping Andy Dufresne for who knows how long. They had been sodomizing him, but now they cornered him in movie night in the projection room, and one of the sisters, Boggs, was going to force Andy Dufresne to perform fellatio on him. And he says to Andy Dufresne, now you're going to swallow everything that I give you. And then you're going to do the same thing for the other guys. Right? And if you don't, I'm going to stick all 6 inches of this blade in your temple. And now in the film, Andy very cleverly says to him, yeah, but you should know that, any trauma to the head causes the victim to bite down hard, and that the bite reflex is so strong, sometimes they have to pry open the victim's jaw with a crowbar. So Boggs and his friends didn't put anything in Andy's mouth that night, Red tells us, but they did beat him within an inch of his life. Because what any psychologist will tell you is that rape is not lust, it's violence. And violence is a manifestation of anger and frustration and an attempt to control outcomes. And that when Red tells Andy, you better grow eyes in the back of your head because the sisters have taken a liking to you. And Andy says, I guess it wouldn't help me telling them that I'm not homosexual. And Red says, well, neither are they. Like when you see two dogs humping each other and two male dogs humping each other, that's not sexuality. That's not lust. That's dominance behavior. That's control. That's fear. That's organization of the pecking order. And the reason why sodomy is such a thing in prison is because these men, all of their franchise has been taken away from them. Their freedom has been taken away from them. Their power, their ability to control their lives and their destiny has been taken away from them. They have to do everything by the book, by the numbers, by the clock, by the schedules, by what the guards tell them, by what the rules say, by what the warden says. So they've lost all their franchise. They're not in control. So, and many of them are afraid. And they're feeling, they have the anxiety, they have the terror. And, Brooks and Red, both of them say it's terrible living in fear. So, what's the easiest way to regain your franchise, to regain your a sense of control in your life? To exert control and dominance over others. That's the one thing that prisoners can find a way to do in prison. In a quiet corner when nobody else is looking, to corner another prisoner and rape him in the showers, for example. Because rape is violence. Rape is control. Rape is dominance. To impose your will upon another who is unwilling to participate, and you force it upon them. Like you're shoving something down their throat. Which brings us again back to this fellatio aspect. And why it is that I, like so many, suffer from that particular fantasy delusion, that sexual delusion of that, and why succubi, if they come to in dreams and they try to steal my sexual force, my vital energy, they know exactly what to do. They know exactly what's going to stimulate the demon, and the demon is all too happy to give them what they want because the demon gets what he wants, which is to shove something down someone's throat and get them to swallow whatever he gives them. Now, many men won't know this, but women will know this. Women who have performed fellatio willingly or not, or perhaps like maybe they didn't really want to, but they felt they had to, or maybe they didn't really like it, but they wanted to just to please their man or whatever. Obviously, fellatio, for the individual performing fellatio is all about mouth feel. This is important. We're talking, I said, we're going to get explicit today. But this is important in the understanding and the comprehension of the real nature of these things. Mouth, it's all about mouth feel for the individual performing it. In the same way, it's all about stimulation for the individual receiving it. Now, this comes back to the aspect that I was speaking of earlier about sugar and how nobody's really addicted to sugar. But when you think of the things that people are addicted to when it comes to sugar, you think of some things like gummy bears and gummy worms and Sour Patch Kids and licorice. Now, what about, and then chocolate and whipping cream, creamy things, ice cream, high calorie, high sugar, but it's all about mouth feel. This is a technical term used by food scientists in the engineering of highly processed and ultra processed foods to make them irresistible so that you can't stop eating them. And you think of those creamy things and those like the pastries and the soft, and then these like cookies like Viva Puffs and like meringue and all of these like creamy, soft, gooey, chewy thing that's all about the mouth feel and then the sweetness of it. And then, of course, the fattiness of it if you're talking about ice cream. But even if you're talking about frozen yogurt or sherbet, it doesn't matter. It's mouth feel. Related to that are the crunchy munchy things, the crunch, which is a different kind of mouth feel. It's more of a angry sort of like getting your frustrations out mouth feel. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It's all about the crunch. Like the satisfaction that you would get from snapping a stack of pencils, or when you're crunching dry leaves in the autumn and that crunch, crunch, crunch that you get with that. There's this satisfying thing about crunching things and breaking things, but no more. This is felt and expressed no more than in the mouth. Crackers and, again, potato chips, popcorn, you name it, breadsticks, pretzels, nuts, peanuts and walnuts and all the whole shebang. So these are, you might say these are like two extremes on the mouth feel spectrum, both of which, if you recall, I invoked and described are the two kinds of foods that I binge on while depressed. These are my drugs. The 2 bags of sour cream and onion potato chips. And sour cream and onion, by the way, merges and meshes the two extremes, the creaminess and the fattiness of sour cream and onion, with the crunchiness and the fattiness and the saltiness of the potato chips, and it's sour cream and onion chips. It like, because they start off crunchy, but then as they dissolve and they mix with the saliva, that potato turns into like this creamy, chivy, salty, MSG laden mashed potatoes in your mouth. Right? Mouth feel. Or I'll eat, a gallon of ice cream. It's all about the mouth feel and being and stuffing myself, filling myself up. Binging, right? You fill yourself up on junk food. It's all about the mouth feel, but then you also end up being filled up. This is why that Thursday night near wet dream, where I was visited by a succubi who was performing fellatio and nearly losing it, and meditating on that, and meditating on the fact that fellatio is all about domination, and that every man who has fellatio performed on him wants the woman, or other man, if in the case of homosexuality, but in any case, the man wants his partner to pleasure him, and he is presenting them with this unique mouth feel, but he also wants them to swallow everything that he gives them. He wants to fill them up through the oral cavity. And if you've ever watched violent, angry pornography, where it's basically like, this is very common in hentai and Japanese anime, where they have this strange fetish and fantasy where they actually can't show rape, but what they can show is tentacly monsters raping high school girls. And they have these monsters with these tentacles angrily shoving these oversized tentacles into their mouth, and essentially raping them, multiple orifices being raped simultaneously by this tentacle monster. And this is like a common thing in Japanese anime. So you have this stuffing of the oral cavity and a feeding of a submissive partner, whatever it is that you want to give them. And you expect them to swallow whatever you give them, to be filled up by you. You are filling them up. For years, I was misled by my binging, by my emotional eating, thinking that it was gluttony. I could never understand why sometimes I was gluttonous and sometimes I wasn't. And that for other things, I wasn't gluttonous. I would never overeat certain types of food, but then other types of food I would overeat. And I would meditate on it. It would never comprehend it. It never made any sense to me. But now this Friday, this comprehension that I'm sharing with you, it finally clicked. After 50 years, after all this time, after a lifetime of emotional eating and stuffing my face on junk food and specific kinds of food that gave me that mouth feel, that was all about the mouth feel and the sweetness and the creaminess or the crunchiness the angriness mixed with the creaminess. It's because when I'm depressed, when the demon of fear and control is not getting his way, but he wants to dominate, but it's not getting his way. He's throwing a temper tantrum. So what does he do? He wants to lord over, right? He wants to possess me. He wants to lord over me. He wants to be in control of me. That's when I realized at last that when I'm stuffing my face, when I'm depressed and I think I'm using food to cope with my depression, that's the demon performing fellatio on me. I'm on my knees. I've been brought to my knees by the depression that the demon instigated, that the demon is causing me, draining me of all of my energy, of my willpower, of my ability to resist. And then he gets me to focus on mouth feel and swallowing. That is the demon, pardon my words here, pardon the language, but that's when the demon is face fucking me. When I'm binging on junk food. When I'm depressed and binging on junk food and I think I'm emotionally eating. That's when the demon is face fucking me. And I'm swallowing whatever the demon wants me to swallow. And I'm filling myself up. I'm becoming full. Because as I'm becoming full, the demon is becoming full of himself. Puffed out, satisfied, strong, right? Full of himself. That's ego, that's narcissism. That's self and the comfort and security of feeling full. So there is an aspect of the gluttony in there, but it's not gluttony. It's not gluttony. That's a distraction. That's a misdirection. In my case, that habit, those behaviors, right? Because there's two things that egos, there's two states that egos want to feel, because remember, especially fear. Fear is the primal survival instinct. And it has two aspects. The primal survival instinct serves mechanical nature in two ways, which I've described already in the past. Survival of the individual and survival of the species. What is survival of the individual? To be comfortable, to be secure, and to have a full stomach, to be stuffed, to be full of yourself, to be proud, to be at the head of the pack, at the head of the pride, to be the alpha male, to have first dibs on food and first dibs on mates, which brings us to the other aspect, survival of the species, which is the feeling of being empty, the feeling of being spent, of flushing out, of dumping, of feeding, of filling up another with your essence, with your seed, planting your seed in another. And in women, it's the reverse, because the fear comes through anxiety for others and those you care for. So you're nurturing the female nurturing instinct as the survival instinct. To nurture children, you feed your children. You feed your husband. This is why lionesses feed the pack. They are the huntresses. They are the hunters. They hunt because they fill the pride with food in the same way that a mother feeds her baby from her breast. But of course, the only way a woman can have such a baby is if she was filled. She had to be filled by her mate. And she had to receive everything that her mate gave her and allow her mate to plant his seed inside of her in order for that then she could then feel full of what? Full of her child, her baby, her offspring, which comes through some degree of discomfort or pain for people anyway, not so much for animals. Sometimes, yes, when you have complications of pregnancy. But then there's the emptying out, the birthing process and the giving birth, right? And then releasing. So there's this filling up. It's being full and being empty, being full and being empty. And those two are reciprocal, like the yin and yang for the male and female energy, but it's still being full and being empty. These are the two states that fulfill fear, the primal survival instinct. And that sense of control, that being full of strength, full of power, full of potency, full of adulation, full of followers, to be at the alpha position, to be at the head of the pack, the head of the pride. And so fear, the desire to control, the desire to dominate, was what was behind my binge eating. I was being filled by the demon who at once simultaneously wanted to feel empty, wanted to feel like I was eating, I was swallowing everything that he gave me. But because that demon is me, it was filling me up at the same time. So it was like he was satisfying both ends of the spectrum. I will never, ever be able to sit down with a tub of ice cream or a bag of chips ever again without the knowledge, without the comprehension of what that might mean. And if I ever fall into depression again, and I'm drained of all my energy and I'm drained of all my motivation, and it pops into my head that I should go to the store and get some ice cream or go and like eat a box of crackers and cheese or whatever, I will always now have the knowledge that no, that's just fear trying to shove his phallus and force himself into my mouth and trying to fill me up with what he wants me to swallow. That's me binging on junk food while depressed is me being raped, orally raped, angrily, orally raped. And up until now, I was doing it, I was consenting. Out of ignorance, I was consenting. But he had worn me down. That's what depression is. Sucking all my energy out wearing me down, weak, no willpower, and then putting into my head, oh, well, make yourself feel better. Have some junk food or have a couple pizzas or whatever, right? None of this would have been possible had I not had that beautiful friend of mine tell me on Sunday, let yourself, if you need to have what you need to cope, let yourself do it. She gave me permission to binge and not worry about it and not resist it and by over binging, by allowing the demon to really have his way with me in that binging behavior, I think the demon kind of let down his guard. I think he showed his hand by letting the demon have his way with me and letting these succubi come and try to make me come and giving me the opportunity to meditate on all that, and then the next night allowing the demon to, like, for me to have the 2 bags of chips, and that, like, the demon was emboldened. He said, I've got control of this guy. I can get him to do whatever I want him to do. And then, so in the dream, I let myself unload on my father. And my father in the dream, what did he have to do? He had to sit there and take it. He had to sit there and listen. He had to sit there and swallow everything that I gave him, all of my wrath, all of my vitriol, all of my frustration, all of my anger, all of my resentment, right? And my father, who's dead, he couldn't go anywhere. He was trapped. He was trapped there with me in the astral plane. You see, so by giving in to that so-called binging behavior and not worrying about it and just allowing myself and just giving into it for a couple days, that seemed to embolden the demon in the astral plane, in the subconscious mind at night, and gave me a window into his activity, what he was really about, what the depression was really all about. But of course, as I've been explaining, it's all the same thing. Because giving my father a dressing down and telling him what's what is that? Oral violence. It's oral again. Right? It doesn't matter if you're being filled up or you are emptying yourself. The oral cavity is a sexual organ. We take energy in, but we also expel energy out. And so the transference of energy and the transformation of impressions and the giving of impressions and receiving of impressions, these are an exchange of energy. And anytime any expression is received in consciousness, that's a sexual act. That's an act of creation. But forcing people to listen to you and expecting them to swallow what you give them, okay, this is something that I had to face years ago, and what prevented me from starting this live stream for a long, long time. Because I knew even then there was a connection between my fetish for oral sex and the fantasies that I had around oral sex, and not just fantasies, but experiences around that, because I had in university, I had a girlfriend who was addicted to pornography. Her father had a satellite dish. Her parents had a satellite dish, and she cracked the parental codes, and she had access to all the adult satellite channels, and she became addicted to pornography. So when she and I met and we had a lot of sexual chemistry, she enjoyed performing oral sex on me as much as I enjoyed receiving it. So at a very young age, I was spoiled rotten. And I mean that in the most literal sense of the word. And she was unfortunately, we both, because I had an older brother, I also had access to pornography. Both of us prided ourselves on being able to pleasure one another in the ways that we had watched others, the professionals, do. And we had prided ourselves, because I was never so popular. I was never the most good looking guy, or the most fit guy, or what. So I always knew that if I wanted to really impress women, I would have to go above and beyond the call of duty. And she was very much the same mentality. So when we got together, it was like we were two, we were energetically and philosophically and sexually matched. And unfortunately, she enjoyed to give what I enjoyed to receive, and she enjoyed to receive what I had to give her. And it was a relationship based on fear and pride, and domination, and lust, and a lot of lust. And I've lived with that ever since. I lived with that with the experience of that, and having to try to shake that off, and that, because that really is a kind of addiction. But it was all coming from this sense of insecurity, right? This sense of not being good enough, and and not being able to um dominate, or be in control, or be be the aggressor, and the man, right? So of course, my demon conspired to make sure that I had a way to have women, you know, melt in my hands, right? Or melt in my mouth, as the case may be, and dominate them that way, where I could turn them into putty. And then so the feeling that gave me of being in control, it was like you push the right buttons, and all of a sudden she'll do anything, and she'll behave anyway, because you press the right buttons. It's like what to push to get her to do what you want her to do. And it's all about control and domination and instant gratification, right? You press the button, you get the prize, like the frickin' rats in a laboratory experiment. You press the bar, you get the pellet. Instant gratification, which is what all of this digital technology is about, right? All this tap 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 tap, and all these video games and Candy Crush and all that kind of stuff, with all this ASMR and all these, you press the right buttons in the right sequence, and you get the right rewards, and the right, the right sounds, the pachinko sounds, and everything else, and it stimulates, and you get the dopamine hits and everything else, right? It's all the same thing. It's just at different levels, and in different layers, and in different expressions of the same mechanical cause and effect relationship, that is the stimulation response, and signaling the pleasure centers. But it's control related, right? When you get to press the buttons, and you learn the secrets of pressing the right buttons to get what you want, and then you feel, then that feeling of control, if you're in control, well, then you're safe. You have confidence, you're secure, because you're the one in control. This is all all reducible to fear, to that basic survival instinct, feeling full and feeling empty, and getting others to do what you need them to do in order to feel full and in order to feel empty. And that's why so many women are willing to submit themselves. And even if they're aggressors and even if they're dominant, they will play the role of submissive. Why? Because if they really want to be pregnant or they really want to feel full, if they play the submissive, if they submit to what they know the man wants, which is to feel dominant and strong and powerful, and he wants to feel like he wants to empty himself and he wants to feel like he's filling someone up, well, then I will give him a submissive, open, willing vessel to fill. It's a lot of sexuality plays out in that simple dynamic. And so many times, the passive aggressive person is actually the aggressor because she's manipulating the guy who thinks he's the aggressor, but she's allowing him, she's humoring him. The passive aggressive individual often is humoring the aggressive individual by playing passive aggressive, but not just humoring, but also frustrating, because the toxic passive aggressive person, they're really aggressive, but they're passive aggressive. So they're gaslighting, they're guilting, they're shaming, they're evading, and they're throwing everything back in their face. So what they're doing is they're wearing down that aggressor, because that aggressor keeps pounding his head up against the wall, and will keep pounding his head up against the wall, up against the wall, up against the wall, being worn down and down and down and down and down until finally they're exhausted. And when they're exhausted, they have no energy left. They have no fight left in them. Then the passive aggressor pounces. The claws come out, because now the aggressor is weak, is frail, can't fight back. So the passive aggressive, the real nature comes out, which is they were the aggressor. They were always the aggressor, but they were too weak. They couldn't make an all-out assault because they were weaker than the dominant individual. So they had to assume this winning strategy of passive aggressive and wearing them down and wearing them down and wearing them down. This is exactly what Muhammad Ali did to George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle. And if you're not familiar with that fight, it's one of the greatest boxing matches in history, one of the most historic boxing matches in history. There is a documentary called When We Were Kings that is all about the Rumble in the Jungle and how Ali used passive-aggressive psychological tactics on George Foreman, the heavyweight champion of the world, over weeks, laying this trap for George Foreman. And George Foreman falling headfirst into that trap, and Ali springing it on him in the middle of the ring in Zaire. And the outcome was as you might have expected. And it's that documentary film, whatever you might like or not like about boxing, it doesn't matter, as a case study, as an allegory, as a living, breathing example for the entire world to see, documented for all time in that film, When We Were Kings. When We Were Kings. And these two titans of sport, these giants among men, squaring off against each other for the heavyweight championship of the world in Zaire, of all places, surrounded by tens upon tens of thousands of screaming Africans, filled with bloodlust, chanting Ali Boombaye, Ali Boombaye, which meant Ali, kill him. This is what we have to comprehend and understand is happening inside our own psychology. And I hope in some small way, my sharing all of this with you today, this culmination of the not just the past 50 years of my life with my father, but the last 2 months since his death, the last 2 weeks since my falling into deep depression, and the last 2 days of allowing myself to be in hell and just observe myself, and then meditate, practice the AUM of Life, the Analogous Ultimate Methodology, and meditate on what I observed in myself, not just during the day, but at night in my dreams, and observing those behaviors and meditating on their nature, where they were coming from, and what they were hoping to accomplish. And without any judgment, without any thinking, without any intellectualization, just playing it out and just allowing it to be, and just sitting with it in meditation, and just viewing it over and over like a detective, or what do you call those analysts looking at evidence, and just observing and allowing the key piece of evidence to leap out at them. Just not looking for it, just sitting back and observing. Like, you ever see those detective shows where the detective puts all the evidence on a big bulletin board, and he's got the threads linking this person to that person and this event to that event, right? And he just sits back, and then eventually, sooner or later, it just comes to him. It all just comes together and solidifies in a comprehensive, overarching, big picture narrative, and then boom, he gets it. But without the collection of all the little bits and pieces of collected evidence, all the little experiential knowledge, right? The big picture doesn't have that opportunity to crystallize. But you have to sit back and observe it and allow it to synthesize in your consciousness. So I hope that in some small way, me sharing all of this with you has given you some valuable insights into the process, but also into the fruits of that process, and some insights into the nature of demons, the nature of our defects and vices, the nature of our habits and behaviors, of depression, of anxiety, of fear, and of the need to control, and many of the sexual fetishes that we might have, and other behaviors and habits and vices that we might have. And it's when we drill down and get to the essence, and why it's so important not to look at things literally all the time and simply and intellectually, superficially, but archetypally, right? Like fellatio, like ejaculation inside of a woman, whether it's vaginal or oral. What does that mean? What, right? It's not just what the textbooks say it is. There's a lot more going on there. There are archetypal truths that these actions represent that have far-reaching consequences and far-reaching implications when it comes to our psychology and the other behaviors that we engage in, and the other psychological things that we suffer from and that we impose on others, that we subject others to as well, especially when it comes to domination and submission, especially when it comes to sexuality, where invariably it involves others, and others which we often purport to care so deeply about. But we have to be able to look honestly and objectively and humbly at ourselves. Let me, there's a couple, Benjamin left a couple of comments here. Polish Pro said, I've always wondered why a group of lions is called a pride. It's just as you described. The lions embody how pride grows and swells, and at the root of it all lies fear. Thank you. Yeah, it's the survival instinct. But the female, women nurture, right? So a lioness will feed her cubs from her teats. Like most mammals, the female feeds her newborns from her teats. Breastfeeding. It just so happens that is such a, and look at even your own domestic cat. If you have cats, if you have a cat who's a hunter, how often has your cat brought you some dead animal? Your cat brings you dead animals because your cat basically thinks you're another cat, a strange cat with some strange behaviors, but cats treat you as part of their pride. So I don't know if male cats do this, because I've never really been a cat owner, or it's only female cats who do this. But in any case, cats will bring you things that they've hunted because, they want to make a contribution. I guess they want to feed you. They think you're too skinny. Benjamin Raphael also says, I've always wondered why a group of, oh, sorry. No, it's the same thing. He posted it twice. So, today, obviously, in order to have this, share all of this with you, as I said, experience is more valuable than talking in the abstract. Now, because if we're talking about experience, we kind of have to focus on my experience. That's what I can talk about most authoritatively. And I don't want you to leave the impression with you that all of this was just narcissistic and self-serving. I hope you recognize that, because I was really spilling my guts and sharing things quite publicly that I'm not sure most people would feel comfortable doing. Kathy says, my female cats bring me dead things. Okay, well, there you go. But as you know, the path is all about humility. We must embrace radical humility. And so, on the contrary, today is not about narcissism and making the focus all about me or poor me, or I don't know, making me into some kind of a victim or anything of that nature. What today was about was I want to talk about frustration and instant gratification. Trying to use Microsoft products and trying to be able to actually do work with Microsoft products is the antithesis of instant gratification. Kathy says, I recognize the information you brought out today, learned a few things. Well, that's good. I'm happy to hear it, but we're still not done yet. because we need to understand something very important. I want to share with you. You may have noticed that I made a post earlier today on Atlas Conscious Arts talking about the movie The Substance. Stars Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. You can watch this movie on Mubi, which, that was the other link that I was supposed to look up for you. Let me pull it up. There it is. Okay. There's a reject all. Okay. So, it's $17 a month. I thought Mubi was one of these. Anyway, there's a 7-day free trial. Or it's $17 a month. Anyway, in any case, this is where you can watch it. If you want to watch it. Now, I warn you, I absolutely warn you, it's the first two acts of the movie. The first act of the movie is really good because it sets up the premise. The second act, things begin to slide, but there are moments of brilliance in the second act. The third act, everything goes to hell, and the entire thing devolves precipitously into a B movie, ultra-violent, body horror, shock horror, just bloodfest, and it's just atrocious. It's the third act completely destroys the movie. It ruins the movie from being one of the greats. It could have been one of the all-time great science fiction and esoteric movies. So the third act really lets down the movie. So if you want to wait until it comes to some streaming service that you can watch it for free, do so. I'm going to try to share with you one of the key insights from the film. As I said, I did I posted a blog on Atlas Conscious Arts. Okay, and it's right here. This article, the substance is a cautionary tale of the future of AI slop. And what do I mean by that? It's not the point that I want to talk about right now, but it describes some of what happens in the film, and so you can get a better sense of some of what takes place in the movie. And I'll here's the link. I'll post it in the comments. It's a rather long link, but if you go to atlas.ca and click on insights, it's the first article. Or go to Atlas Conscious Arts on Facebook, and I posted it there as well. Kathy says, Benjamin says, does beauty have something to do with the ego? I think what makes ego so alluring, like lust or greed, is that people find a certain beauty in it. For example, men tend to feel lust when they perceive a woman as beautiful, not unattractive. That's actually what the substance is about. It's the connection between beauty and ego, and when someone puts their identification and attachment to their outward appearance and to the validation that they receive from society because they are so-called beautiful, right? And then so Demi Moore, her character, plays an aging actress who is no longer as hot and sexy as she used to be, and so her cachet in the industry is going down. So there's this there's this underground company that produces this do-it-yourself, like, imagine a do-it-yourself home Botox kit, but dialed up to 11, like with all of the sci-fi craziness, that you can imagine in a do-it-yourself home Botox kit, where you do this injection that creates a genetic doppelganger of you, but younger and more beautiful. And this doppelganger, this double, is born out of your body. So now there's like two versions of you. But Demi Moore, the older aging version, and Margaret Qualley plays the younger, better version of herself. And now these two selves, right, coexist in the world. But there's an exact protocol that must be followed. A feeding protocol, and a nourishing protocol, and a recharging protocol, but it's all organic, blood-based and bodily fluid-based. There's an exchange that needs to take place. And I don't want to get into the necessary details of all of that. But the point is that that what happens is that the younger, better version starts taking liberties. She starts stretching the time. She starts taking more fluid out of her essentially her mother, right? Her host, Demi Moore. And she because she wants to stay beautiful for longer, because this balance has to be maintained under the protocol. So you spend a week as your beautiful, better self, and then you spend another week, you transfer back to your old self and spend a week as your old self, recharging, rejuvenating your vital fluids, that you then transfer back to your new, younger self, right? And this balance has to be maintained according to the protocol. However, the temptations of staying younger and more beautiful for longer periods of time and stretching that protocol, throwing off the balance, the temptations are too great. And so the drama, the conflict, and the drama unfolds from that. And what happens is the younger, more beautiful version of Demi Moore starts to exploit and extract more of Demi Moore's vitality, and she starts aging that much more rapidly. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. Now, couple of quick comments before we continue on here. Kathy says, you are being raw and authentic, and it's appreciated. Well, I'm trying to be. That's the whole point of today. So I'm glad it's appreciated, because that's the whole point of this whole past 2 weeks and the past 2 days. Like this, everything happens for a reason, right? And the ability for you guys to, again, kind of like experience vicariously through what I'm going through. But like I said, instead of me telling you something that happened 20 years ago, or telling you something that somebody wrote about in a book, I'm telling you something that I went through like 48 hours ago and over the past 2 weeks. Right? And so it's so real. It's now. It's as immediate as I can possibly make it for you. and it's so vibrant and vital and here and present with me now. This is my reality now. This is my path now. This is the Aum of Life unfolding. This is Attlas information before your very eyes. And yes, it is raw, it is unfettered, it is completely transparent, and it is completely authentic. There is no holds barred, no punches pulled. I have nothing to hide. I am an open book, right? There is no scripture that can substitute what you get on this program. None. None. Because where else can you? You're experiencing practically in real time someone unfolding on the path of the Bodhisattva, right? I can't imagine being able to offer you anything more than everything that I am, right? So it's all entirely for you. It's all entirely for your service. And it's within the spirit of complete selflessness. And you take it or leave it. I'm here to give it. I'm here to show it. The show must go on, but you do it what you will. I am not here ramming anything down your throat. God forbid. And I'm not here expecting anybody to swallow anything that I'm giving you here. Right. And I knew that, and I recognized that aspect of fellatio and the connection between my demon and me teaching, and how the demon was getting in the way of me teaching. Because when I first started making posts online of a spiritual nature, I was ramming shit down people's throats. I was insufferable. I was an insufferable asshole. Right. And when I got into arguments with people on Facebook, I was adamant that they had to listen to what I had to say, and they had to agree with me, and they had to swallow what I was ramming down their throat. And we all know now exactly what that means, and that it was the demon who was hijacking the process. Atlas's life's work, this process of being information and offering information. The demon was getting in the way of that. That's why I resisted starting this podcast for so long. And it wasn't until my mother died. It wasn't until the 2 months that I spent taking care of my mother in her cancer, and nothing but unconditional love poured out of me. And there was my frail, dying mother, 79 years old, sorry, at that time she wasn't 79 years old. She was only she was like 73 years old. And anyway, my math is all messed up. She was 7 years younger than my dad. My dad died, he was 86. She would have been 79. So 79 minus 6 years. Do the math. She was 73. Regardless, she was frail, she was dying, she was weak, she was suffering. I was there for her. I did anything that she needed, everything that she wanted. She could do no wrong. But nothing that I did was imposed on her. I was there for her. I spoke to her. I showed her. I helped her. I picked her up when she fell off the potty. I cleaned up all the piss and shit that was splattered all over the room when she flipped off the potty and the bucket went flying. And I did it all with joy and gratitude and complete and total abandon and humility. That was my mother's parting gift to me. Her cancer, her suffering and death gave me the opportunity to allow unlimited, unconditional love to flow through me to someone in the full spirit of complete selflessness and total humility. And it was only after she passed, and it was only after I comprehended the depths and the scale and the scope of my mother's final nurturing act for my sake, not Attila's sake, but Atlas's sake, that that I realized that it was Attlas who took care of my mother, not Attila, but Attlas. The demon took a back seat, and I fully comprehended how I needed to move forward in my work, in my life's work, and treat everyone with that same spirit of selflessness, and just be there, just be, not do, not ram down people's throats, but be. And sure, I can be enthusiastic, I can be passionate, but burn like the fire of the sun, not the intensity of a death ray, right? Slicing somebody down the middle like the blade of a lightsaber, but instead just glow, right? And present the truth with the intensity and the glow and the fire of that Christic fire, but take it or leave it. The sun just shines. The sun just shines. The sun doesn't force itself upon anybody. It just shines. If you want to stay in the shade, if you want to go inside, if you want to go underground, the sun doesn't complain. The sun doesn't come and break down your door and shine its light in your face. No, if you want to go underground, it's your business. You're free to do as you will, right? The sun doesn't ram itself down people's throats. It just shines. It's just there in the sky. And it was my mom's illness that showed me how to just shine and be there for someone who needs me and needs to be cared for, but doesn't need me to force anything upon her. But that's really, really, really important to know. And had I not learned that lesson, I might have fallen into the trap that my demon was trying to get me to fall into, like the trap that so many people fall into, which is they're awakening negatively. You see, because we have to understand, okay? We have to understand that we are always a triunity. Always. Now, we love to think in binary terms, black and white, us or them, me or you, right or wrong, male or female, and on and on and on it goes. Before I continue, let me grab the last couple comments here. Benjamin says the poster suggests it's a gory film. You know what? There's body horror in the beginning, like in the first 2 acts. Yes, there's body horror, but it's relatively tame. There's nudity, there's sexuality, and there's like some gore, some body horror. But the third act is over the top nonsense. Okay, so the entire film goes off the rails in the third act. So again, it's not like I'm recommending the movie like it's a great movie or something. I'm sharing it because of what I want to share with you now. What the movie, there's an aspect of the film which has glimmers of greatness, but these glimmers of greatness are just glimmers. They're never followed up on because the filmmakers, the creators of the film, never really comprehend what it is they're working with and why. They never comprehend the significance of the premise and the ideas and the inspirations that they're working with and that they're stealing from other classic movies. That's what the blog article is about, and why it's a template for what AI slop is going to look like in the future when all Hollywood movies are written by AI, because it's like the filmmakers of the substance, they're just cherry picking cool shit from all kinds of classic horror movies, um, everything from Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, The Fly, The Elephant Man, and even movies like Fight Club, Legend. Like, it's just nonstop. Oh, The Shining. Like, there are scenes from the movie that are straight up stolen from The Shining or Carrie or what, I mean, it's just, you just list on and on and on. You're watching these movies and say, that's from The Shining, that's from Fight Club, that's from this movie, that's from that movie. But this movie never does it any justice, and it's just picking cool shit from these other movies, exactly the way that an AI picks cool shit from its database, and then it just splices it all together in a montage and calls it something new. Well, the substance isn't really new, and its newness and its creativity and what it was really bringing to the table, glimmers of true inspiration and true insight that were very intriguing, and we're relaying a universal truth. It never follows up on those, because in Act 3 it all degrades into ultra violence and gore and just empty spectacle, and the entire thing is reduced to a B movie bloodfest, and it's not worth your time. But the potential was there, and it was squandered because the filmmakers, the creators, did not know what they had. They did not know what they were working with, in the same way that an AI doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't know what it's working with in its database, right? It's just using statistical probabilities to stitch things together that likely go together. That's it. But that's kind of like how the intellect works. The intellect doesn't really know. It's cherry picking and choosing to create a narrative that makes sense given all the components and given the habituated, conditioned learning, the conditioning of the intellect. So that, oh yeah, it makes sense. Why? Well, because of this and this and this and this and this. That's all rationalization. We call them subjectivity. We call it conditioning, and we call them biases, right? Our subjective biases are the beliefs that we have that are based on our conditioned biases, our learned biases. In AI, they call biases weights, and those weights are developed through its so-called learning. But it's the same shit. It's not intelligence. In the same way that the rational mind is not true intelligence, it's intellectualism. But that's not genuine intelligence, because genuine intelligence is knowing, and the mind doesn't know, and neither does AI. And that's reflected in the movie The Substance, which is why I say it is a cautionary tale. And if you want to know what AI movies are going to look like in the future, watch The Substance, and why it's so utterly unsatisfying at the end. Kathy Holton says, I hesitated watching it. Well, you followed your intuition, and I think your intuition served you well. Leah de Conateur says, what would we all feel or see if mirrors were never created? Well, that's an interesting philosophical question. What would we all feel or see if mirrors were never created? Well, I can tell you that we would have, without being able to see our reflection, we would have less self-knowledge. However, the fact that we can see our external self, our external reflection, the reverse is also true. We are more easily hypnotized because we become identified and attached to the image in the mirror, right? The perceived self-image or the projected self-image. So It can go either way, right? A mirror in and of itself is not a bad thing. It is what it is, and it shows us what it shows us. Our reflection, just like our face and our physical body and our present appearance, is not in and of itself a good or a bad thing. It is how we choose to interpret it. It's the stories that we allow ourselves to weave around our experience, right? It's the narratives, the stories we tell us, the psychological songs that we allow to be sung about us that hypnotize us or liberate us. But imagine if you had a mirror that let you look inside your soul. Imagine if you could see yourself divided into the three selves. Now, what do I mean by that? We have our self. This is our self with a capital S. This is our true self, our innermost being. Then we have our self, right? The mortal vessel and vehicle, right? That's like the physical body, the personality, the mind, the intellect, right? That's the self. Then we have what I'm going to call, you know what? Because I want to make it easier. Then we have our shadow. Okay? We call this our shadow self, but I don't want to make it confusing with too much talk of self, right? So even this self, let's get rid of this self because we're running short on time, and let's call this a spade a spade. This is our being. And shadow, refers to like the Jungian shadow, the shadow self. So what substance gets right, okay, is that this shadow, this is all of our desire. This is ego, in the sense of cravings and aversions. This is the shadow self, or the self that we want to be. This is the shadow is what consumes, right? It consumes. Because egos consume. Because machines need energy and they want people to pay attention to us. That's ego, that's I, right? That's why the I is always vying for attention, and why the most valuable thing that you can show someone is really listening to them, to really pay attention to them and focus all of your attention on them, and lavish them with all of your effort and all of your energy, right? Okay, there's no better way to show someone you care about them than to give them of yourself. Well, the ego knows that, and that's exactly what the ego wants, to take from you, right? So if you're too naive and you cast pearls before swine, the swine will eat the pearls and you'll end up poor, and the swine will end up fat and happy, right? But you've given all of your treasures to swine. This is something that the substance gets very right, because the younger, more beautiful self, right? She breaks the balance, the harmony between the shadow and the self. They're supposed to move back and forth 50-50. 1 week in the younger, better version, and then 1 week in the older, the older version. Let that self rejuvenate and restore the vitality that the shadow then consumes, that then the shadow feeds on and uses to recharge itself every day. So there's supposed to be this balance between the shadow and the self, and this intimates what Jung called the integration of the shadow, where okay, you that everything in moderation, and it's a very kind of sort of languid, altruistic, I guess even you might even call Taoist Jungian psychology, that the integration of the shadow, as long as everything's kept in balance, then you can actually use the shadow to your benefit. This is the projected self, the self that you send out into the world, the one that enjoys the adulation of others, that lives in pride and wants to indulge desires, right? Cravings and aversions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But what happens is the shadow starts breaking the contract, and she starts using more of the self's resources, and she starts staying younger for longer. That leads Demi Moore to make a phone call to the company that sold her the substance, that provides her with the kits in order to be able to have this arrangement and to have this younger self. And the company says, well, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do to reverse the effects. And she's like, yeah, but this younger version of myself is taking advantage of me, and she's not following the protocol. And the company says, no, you don't understand. That is you. That is not another. That is you who's doing that. And they hang up on her. This is the glimmer of brilliancy that the substance had, that it failed to capitalize on, that it failed to flesh out, that the shadow, that the self, okay, that we are, is not distinct, is not separate from the shadow. These two are one and the same. We are the shadow. Like when I talk about my demon, I'm talking about Attila. These live streams, I come to you speaking as Attlas. So when I talk about my demon, I'm talking about Attila. The ego, the mortal personality, and all of his desires and his egos. But then the implication of this, from the point of view of the substance, is truly profound. If all there is, if the shadow and the self are one, then the shadow self, that's why Jung called it the shadow self. The integration of the shadow is to restore that which the shadow self hoards for itself. And where did it get it from? It had to get it from somewhere. You see, in the substance, it looks like it's a self, Demi Moore, who, because of ego, creates this alter ego, this second self, this younger, more beautiful version of herself. But how that younger, more beautiful version of herself survives and the balance that needs to be maintained is 100% indicative of our relationship with our being. We consume through desire, through our egos, we consume the vital energy of our being. And if there is a reason to watch the substance, it's to comprehend why, when you lucid dream, why, when you project in the astral plane and ask to see your innermost being, ask to see yourself as you truly are, your true self, right? Not the shadow image that you project into the mirror that you look at, because that's not how you look. This comes back to this comment that Leah asked earlier. What if we didn't have mirrors? And I said one of the problems with mirrors is that they can hypnotize us. And one of the ways they hypnotize us is we think that the reflection in the mirror is how we look. That's not how we look. That is a projection of how we think we look. Our reflection in the mirror is a shadowy projection of our own self-image, of our ego's self-image. It is our shadow self. It is not ourself. But if you awaken in the astral plane and you ask to see yourself as you truly are, your true self, you will not like what you see. Every defect, every vice, every blemish on your character, on your psychology, every fault that you suffer from, all of your egos, everything that makes your life difficult and filled with suffering and strife, that afflicts you psychologically, is reflected in the appearance of your being. So when you see yourself as you truly are on the astral plane, and you see this withered, like you see yourself as Demi Moore becomes in the substance, because the younger, more beautiful version of her has been exploiting and sucking her dry of all of her vitality, all of her vital energy, and she hasn't been honoring the pact, and she hasn't been honoring the balance between herself and herself. And so Demi Moore becomes this decrepit, old, used up, shriveled hag. And when you go and look at yourself in the astral plane, and you see how your being looks and how your being reflects, as above, so below, all of the defects and vices and blemishes on your character, on your psychology, is reflected on your being, but visually. Because when you're awake in the astral plane, when you're lucid, you're conscious, you're awake, you see yourself as you really are, as opposed to here looking in a mirror where you see a projection of your shadow self. You see the younger, more beautiful, blemish-free version that you want to see. And we have to understand, we have to comprehend that as we awaken, if we do not assume radical humility, if we do not comprehend the true nature of the self, which is to be a vessel for the being, the true self, then the shadow self takes over the process, and the consciousness that we're liberating, the awakening and the powers and anything else that belong to the being, to the self in cooperation with the being, end up getting hijacked by the shadow self. And we are developing both the shadow and the being simultaneously. And that is called a Hasna Musin, one with a dual center of gravity. That's the split center of gravity. And the substance reveals this in the second act of the film, just nearing the final act, where the two beings are awake simultaneously and staring at each other for the first time. The shadow and essentially the being, the self, the false self and the true self looking at each other. And where there was a perfect opportunity for a Gollum and Smeagol like battle of wits, or the exchange between Jack and Meg the swamp hag from Ridley Scott's Legend, where Jack outwits has to outwit the swamp hag, and he seduces her. Right? There's a lot of seduction that takes place in Legend, or the way that Gollum and Smeagol have their interaction, but they're one, they're the same. And this would have been a perfect opportunity for that kind of a battle of wits, right? Between the ill will of the ego and the will of the being. But the movie squanders it. Instead, we get a ultra-violent cat fight between the two. The young, hot, beautiful, and the old hag, withered Demi Moore, and they just get into like a fight, and it's just this ultra-violent fight, and the whole opportunity, the whole thing is squandered. And then shortly after that, the whole thing devolves into the Act 3 gore fest, Tarantino-esque blood fest, Shining, Carrie, and then with this theft of the look and feel of the Elephant Man, but cranked up to 11 into this ultra gory thing. So unfortunately, everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. It never reaches the heights that it had the potential to reach, and it's so sad and it's so heartbreaking that the substance ends up being insubstantial, substanceless, empty and devoid of ultimate truth, because it squanders it like an AI, degenerative AI process. That's why I keep referring it to, like, it's the perfect example of AI slop. But for that brief moment of brilliance, of genius, of divinely inspired universal truth, it was showing us the relationship between the projected sense of self and the true self, and the effect that our projected shadow self has on our innermost being. And that every time we fornicate, every time we waste our sexual energy, every time we allow our egos to steal the vital energy from us and our consciousness and our attention, we're draining and we're turning our innermost being into an old, spent, disheveled hag. Just like Demi Moore's transformation, or Jeff Goldblum's transformation in The Fly, right? When he this slow transformation, and so many of the visual gags and the substance are stolen directly from Cronenberg's masterpiece. And the other masterworks, The Shining and the Frankenstein, and at the beginning it seems like the movie is a thoughtful homage to these other great works, but in the end, the movie reveals itself to just have stolen all of these gags, all of these bits from all of these better films, and stitched them together in order to create the substance of its film. But it's just, it ends up showing its hand at the end, and it's clumsy and it's thoughtless and it's awkward and dumbed down and stupid, and it just reveals that the filmmakers ultimately had no conscious knowledge of what they were doing. They were handed the keys to an incredible bounty of universal truth, and they were handed great inspiration and insight, and they squandered it. They wasted it, just like we do every time we fornicate. Right? We're handed the keys to this precious treasure inside of it, and then we waste it on a momentary momentary pleasure, right? And so much of everybody's lives are squandered on that, and so many of people's religious, spiritual journey is squandered on fulfilling the desires of the shadow self, like manifesting desires, and and so on and so forth, and more powerful orgasms through Black Tantra and all the rest of it. And they don't realize that they're awakening simultaneously as both an angel and a demon. That's a Hasnamusin, one with a split center of gravity, right? That's the centaur and the satyr, whose upper body is a man and the lower body is a goat. And what is it about goats? Why do we call goats horny? Right? Horny goats. They have two horns, just like demons, but they also fuck like rabbits. Okay? Goats are the horniest animal on the farm. They reproduce like rabbits, and they will hump anything, and they're aggressive, and they aggressively reproduce. They also eat anything and everything. A goat will eat a tin can. Right? Goats will eat anything. That's why farmers love them all over the world. Farmers love having goats, because all the junk, all the garbage, they don't have, nobody has to so-called what do you call it, compost anywhere in the world. They have goats. What do you think the goats eat? All the trash from the kitchen. That's the goat. The goats eat it. Okay, I mean, they might not eat plastic bags and stuff, but I mean, I'm talking about the peelings and stuff from all the vegetables, and everything that we won't eat off the vegetables, the goats happily eat, right? So they gorge themselves, they eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and they also have lots of sex, right? So it's so half man, half goat, right? So what part of you, right, likes to have lots of sex and likes to be, a lot, like to be what? Full and empty, right? And if you recall, I actually have given presentations on these topics. So, like, Confessions of a Fallen Bodhisattva. So I've done other topics. This was season 5, episode 16, and going all the way back to season 3, episode 3, I did a live stream about the Hasnamusen, or the Hanasmusen. You can pronounce it either way. So these are demi-humans, right? Half human, half demon. And these are the centaurs, and 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 as you can see here, we have the female in as close to performing fellatio on a centaur that you can do anatomically in a drawing like this. She's licking his belly button or whatever she's doing, but the point is being made, right? That I was making today about fellatio and the nature of control and domination. So if you are interested in reviewing these, again, the season number and stuff, you can look it up on YouTube under the Attlas Info Live playlist. But there's the link to Confessions of a Fallen Bodhisattva. And if I can just get to it. Oh, wait a minute. I think... No, the first one is the link to the demi-humans. Sorry. Here's the link to Confessions of a Bodhisattva. If you're interested in reviewing these, because today was very much like Confessions of a Bodhisattva, right? I mean, so anyway, so there's one link, and there's the other link, and it's in the chat, so you can copy and paste it from there. Okay, we're running over time here, so let me get to Azazel's comments here. He says, there's a lot of confusion in the rational mind. Like, I had the annoying thought as to why people born blind people do not see anything in dreams and in their astral body. And he says, I had a hard time making sense of why that would be impossible. Okay, so why blind people cannot see in the astral plane? Okay. Because as above, so below. So you don't have any eyes. There's no such thing as physical eyes, right? All of that's an illusion. Your blindness is not physiological, if that makes any sense, right? It's energetic. It's the senses are not physiological. Everything that exists in a field of consciousness anyway. So any loss of sensory perception exists on the level of consciousness. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. For instance, Beethoven, he could hear music in his head, but he couldn't hear it being played. So it was incredibly frustrating. But again, so there are exceptions and limitations, but somebody who's born blind, that's a reflection of a blindness that exists on higher levels. Now, if someone is not born blind, if someone loses their sight, do they also lose their sight in the astral plane? I doubt it, but I'm not sure because I haven't experienced that. Because Beethoven was not born deaf. He lost his hearing over time. So it made sense that he could still hear music in his head. But were he to have been born deaf, it is very unlikely that he would have been able to hear music in his head, because that is the reason why he was born deaf, because you can't. But again, there are different permutations and computations. I cannot speak on matters, universally, on matters that I don't have experience with. And even if I had, that wouldn't necessarily mean that everybody has the same experience. There are different manifestations and applications, and there are different reasons why someone would be impaired on this level but not impaired on another level. So I'll give you another example. What about someone who's born without legs or born without arms? Now, they don't have arms in the fourth dimension, but when they dream, do they dream of having arms or having legs in the fifth dimension? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. It depends on where the impairment is and on what level of their being that karma or the specific ailment, the disease is striking. Because is it possible for someone to not, like, you cannot have physical arms if you don't have metaphysical arms. So you cannot see, if you already cannot see on the fifth dimension, it's impossible for you to see on the fifth, or on the third, because everything is it's an interlaced reality. But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you lose your sight or go deaf, as Beethoven did, or have your arms cut off. For example, many amputees can still feel their arm or their leg after it's been cut off. Why is that? Well, that's because in the vital body, their leg is still there. And in the astral body and in the mental body, their leg is still there. It was only on the physical level that their leg was removed. So this is not a black and white, cut and dry issue, and there are many permutations and computations of what you're describing, Azazel. And as you point out, this can lead to a lot of confusion in the rational mind. I'm trying to think of a good analogy that you can use. You know what? Maybe like Photoshop and the layers of Photoshop. And what happens if you make certain layers invisible? How does that change the overall picture? And then that layers have a hierarchy to them. So what happens if you make layers lower on that hierarchy invisible versus layers that are higher on that hierarchy? If the layer is more foundational and defining more things, if you make that invisible, the overall effect on the image might be more profound than making a layer lower on the hierarchy invisible, because maybe you only lose a little bit of detail. Whereas if you make a foundational layer invisible, then you lose the foundation. And if you lose the foundation, the structure will fall. Wait a minute. Kathy had, she said, okay, when it came to the substance I was describing what was happening in the movie, and Kathy said, sounds like a fucking nightmare. And then she followed that up by saying, the movie, The Substance, sounds like a fucking nightmare. Yes, I was eventually going to get around to your comment, but thank you for repeating it anyway. So you know what? There's nothing worse than seeing the squandering of great potential. There's nothing worse than that. They had something so good. They had such talented and committed actors, both of them, they were both very brave in what they were doing. We're talking about the nature of the subject matter and the nature of their relationship with one another basically required both of these actresses to commit to full frontal nudity, sometimes in attractive and complementary photography and poses, sometimes in brutal, like just bare bones, like not attractive, not sexy, full nudity. And then you add on to that the body horror, and and then Demi Moore looking at herself in the mirror and watching herself fall to pieces. And then and so, like, both of these actresses showed tremendous courage and tremendous commitment to the subject matter and to the role. And then you had, like, again, they were given all the opportunity, all the inspiration, all the insight. It's there. It's in the movie, what I'm describing. Like, such a profound esoteric insight. It's there, but it's there for such a brief moment of time. It's a glimmer, it's a spark, it's a flash, and then it's gone. And they killed it. They brutalized it. So it breaks my heart because I'm a lover of film. I love great film. I love film. And how many times do I use movies to talk about, universal truths? And I use movies to illustrate topics that we're talking about and make it real and make it meaningful and make it accessible and relatable. That's what art is supposed to do, right? Convey universal truths. And the substance was there. It had it, and then it lost it. It gave it away. It threw it away. It squandered it. And that's what breaks my heart. Kathy Holton was laughing because I did get to her comment that she repeated. That's just fine. Benjamin says, thank you, sir, for today's live stream. It was truly enlightening as always. Thanks again. That's Benjamin's not so subtle way of saying we've gone 3.5 hours. Time to say goodbye. Time to cut it short. The last thing I want to mention, though, before we go, is I cannot overemphasize this relationship. I cannot overstate the dangers of this. Okay? If you do not grasp, if you do not know that there's a tug of war between your being and your shadow, and you are the battlefield, you are what's at stake. If you mistake yourself for your being, then your shadow has you. And in those moments where you have humility and when you know your innermost being and you're receiving from your innermost being, and you know that you are not your being. In other words, you're humble, you're positioning yourself as the vessel, as the vehicle, as a conduit, as an avatar, and you assume that radical humility, because remember, it's not enough to have an attitude of gratitude, but humility contains the gratitude. When you're humble, you're grateful for all you receive when you're humble. And when you are selfless, then the selflessness of your being and the selflessness of your innermost intimate Christ can flow through you into the world. But if you mistake yourself for the one who's on the spiritual journey, you have to understand there is no self. It's only the shadow self. then it's your shadow, it's your ego, it's your desires are consuming, are appropriating, are stealing, and they are breaking the contract. They are abusing and the balance and exploiting the vital energy. It is not your energy, it's the energy of your beings. So this dynamic that's playing out, this is why in the olden days when we were growing up, we had that with the cartoon characters, with the angel and the demon popping up on their shoulders, whispering into their ear. Right? So this is nothing new. It's just that the shadow self never really got it, never let us get it, because it wants to awaken as a demon. And it does that by making us believe we can ascend, that we are the spiritual ones, that we figure it out. So everything that I shared with you today, I shared with you on the basis of I received it. It was given to me. But what if instead of that, I went through the same process, achieved the same comprehension, but instead I came to you and said, here's what I figured out. Here's what I know. Here's what I figured out. I'm a genius. And I was thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And then all of a sudden, bang, it came to me, which is a lot of people do. And that's their process. They think and think and think and think and think and think and think. And they're thinking and thinking and thinking. Then all of a sudden they decide to take a break. They go and they go for a walk, or they take a shower or have a bath or doing the dishes, and bang, all of a sudden it comes to them. And they have that eureka moment. Eureka! And they quickly run to their workshop and start writing it all down. And they think that they came up with it because they were thinking so hard on it. And they take credit for it. And they say, I am the genius. I am the enlightened one. I have the powers. I have the ability. I manifest my desires. I. All of that is a shadow self. All of that is your shadow. Your shadow pretending to be you, convincing you that you are your higher self. That's the shadow pretending to be your higher self. That's the shadow awakening as a demon. And all of your consciousness, all of your enlightenment, everything else, if it's me, I, that's your shadow self, that's your demon who's awakening you, and you're awakening as a demon, you're awakening negatively. Period. End of story. This is how it is. This is how it works. If you do not have an attitude of humility, if you do not know that you are just a mortal vessel and you are here to embody and bring your higher self into the world, to become a living and breathing embodiment, a Christified master, a living God, an angel made flesh, God made flesh, but that your job in that is to be humble and to serve and to be selfless, right? That it's not about you, just as it's not about Attila. It's not about Attila, right? Attila is the shadow. Attila is the one who tried for many, 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 many years to convince himself, right, that he was in control, that he was the one to save the world, that he was the one to teach people and tell them what's what and put them in their place, etc., etc., etc. And had I not assumed humility, had I not learned from life kicking me pulling the rug out from under me and having me fall hard on my ass and falling into hell and being humbled and humiliated over and over and over again. If I hadn't learned from all of that, the lessons that it was here to teach me, called humility, that's why we're humiliated, to learn humility. Had I kept waving my fist at the heavens and I'll show him and I'll show you and I'll show the world and blah, 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 then I would be speaking to you right now as an awakened demon, instead of one who suffers that demon subconsciously, right? Having his temper tantrums and still trying to control me in his certain ways, in a certain that I shared with you today, but that I'm still comprehending and I'm still learning. And I am thankful and grateful and humble that I've been saddled with this entity to spar with, that this opponent, this adversary that has taught me so much about the nature of fear and that has taught me so much about the importance of humility and that has taught me so much that I can share with all of you for your sake, here and now in real time, instead of just talking about parables and scriptures and mythologies and things that other people wrote down in books decades ago, if not centuries ago, if not millennia ago. Because that's all fine and good, that's all wonderful, that's all great. But here and now, nothing ever beats the here and now and the experiential knowledge, the gnosis that we extract from being here and now. And recognizing that, hey, we're all one. And what we do to the least of our brothers, we do to God. And what we do to others, we do unto ourselves. And in so many ways, what we do to ourselves, we do unto God and to others. This is also, we're all connected and this is all part of it. But I'm ignoring Benjamin's not so subtle hint that it's time to call today an end. Thank you all for being here, for spending this excessive amount of time with me today. And I hope you learned something. And if you do watch The Substance, keep in mind. And if you do astral project, if you do, in other words, lucid dream, ask to see your divine mother, ask to see yourself as you really are. That is, ask to see your innermost being. And then if you do see The Substance, you will understand everything that I've been talking about today, because it is in there. It is in there for as briefly a moment that it is. So there you go. But again, I don't recommend the movie because it's a great movie, because the third act is garbage. Okay, so I want to be clear on that. Okay, all right. A couple quick comments. Leah says, "Thank you, Atlas. Much love to you all." Kathy says, "Thank you, Atlas." Well, thank you, both of you and everyone, for being here. Have a great week. Take care of yourselves and those you love. And as always, inverential. Oh, yeah. Live long and prosper. No. As always, inverential peace. That's how you know that it's been too long, even for me. So it's time to go. Take care, everyone. We'll see you again soon.